Hey guys, welcome back to Foreign Bride 101. Here we're talking a little bit about the romance tour experience and some of the logistics and things that go on to help you have a good romance tour and a great end result. We haven't done this topic in a little while. We're just going to spend a little bit of time on it, and then we'll get back to some other things, a few blogs down the road. But so right now we're talking a little bit about some of the things that go on in the middle of a romance tour. We've talked about getting there, some of the getting acquainted with your surroundings, and we've talked about the socials and how to get through a social successfully with a good end result. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the dating activity and what happens somewhat after the dating activity. One of the common topics that comes up in questions and concerns for guys are modes of transportation for us as we're in these foreign cities and for our foreign lady dates. Well, so guys will often ask about what is appropriate for me to do with a lady at the end of the night. I mean, should I send her home in a taxi? Is she okay doing the taxi by herself? Is there public transportation available? How will the girl get home at the end of the night? And, you know, guys, honestly, for most of the women, if we're talking about most of the places that we go to, it's going to involve paying for a taxi. A lot of public transportation isn't available late at night. Sometimes public transportation that is available late at night may not always be the safest option depending on the area that a girl lives in and that kind of thing. Now, they obviously know how to get home by themselves and get home safely, but it will cost them some money. And sometimes, for example, when we're in Ukraine, girls will come from the outer edge of a city to come in for the evening, go out to dinner and spend time with you, but then they've got to get back home at some point, and that's going to involve a taxi drive. And we guys, being gentlemen, are going to want to pay for that taxi ride home. Why do we pay for the taxi ride home? I mentioned before, the average monthly wage for women in a country like Ukraine is about $250 US. The average rent, for example, is about $300. When you add other monthly expenses on top of that, women clearly don't make enough money, which is why you'll often find them living with family members, sisters, friends, etc. They pull together their resources in order to be able to survive and to make it month to month. If we're going to start taking $10 here and $10 there and $10 here for their taxi rides to be available with us on dates, well, obviously that adds up and that impacts their security and their family and etc. So we want to be gentlemen and we want to pay for those things. What's really great about being on tour with us, guys, is that during orientation and each time we get to any of the cities that we're going to, we'll be able to tell you exactly what taxi fare should cost from most places in the city. For example, I can tell you in Odessa that if you're at the hotel where we're doing our social and you want to get to the city center at the end of the social to go out on a date, that's going to cost you about 60 to 80 hryvnias in most, about $6 to $8 in most cases. And we'll be able to tell guys that. So if someone says to you, sure, I've got a taxi to the city center, 250 hryvnia, $25, you'll know that they're overcharging you and you can negotiate that down or take another taxi. It's usually not something guys have a real problem with. But it is important that you pay for a girl's taxi at least on the way home. And sometimes, depending on circumstances, a taxi coming into the city center. Now again, guys, something that guys will often forget about is the exchange rate of money from US to, for example, Ukrainian hryvnia. It's even funnier in places like Colombia where, you know, they have bills for like 1,000,000 pesos, which doesn't really amount to a whole lot of US dollars, but it sounds like a lot of pesos, right? Sometimes we forget the exchange rate, so we'll ask somebody how much for this taxi ride, and they'll say 100 hryvnia, and we automatically think $100, that's ridiculous. I'm not paying 100 hryvnia for some girl's taxi ride. It's $10. It's $10, right? So we got to remember the exchange rate so that we understand what's being asked of us, so that we know that it's normal and typical and perfectly acceptable and we don't get stressed out over it, right? Very, very important. Public transportation, again, is limited. Most of the women that you're going to meet in a lot of foreign cities don't own cars, so they're reliant on some form of taxi or public transportation or something like that. That's something we just have to kind of have our mind wrapped around a little bit if we're going to get on the plane and go to someone else's country and someone else's culture, try and court their women, right? I hope this information was helpful. We'll come back later on and talk a little bit more about dating activity and kind of wrap up this series on logistics around romance tours. So we'll talk again soon.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Then click on the notice bell to get notified every time we add something new. Check out our website at kievwomen.com.